Do you believe it's possible to accidentally step through time and end up over 1,500 years in the future? What if we told you right now that there are documented cases of ordinary people who somehow slipped into the year 3505, witnessed humanity's distant future, and returned to our time completely transformed? If you're thinking this sounds like pure science fiction, and that there has to be a logical explanation for everything, then we're extremely curious to see how you explain these 10 terrifying cases. Because what these people experienced, what they saw in that distant future, and especially how they came back changed forever, will shake your understanding of reality to its core. So, let's jump straight into the first one. And trust us, this one will leave you speechless. In March 2019, a construction worker named Viktor Markov was helping dig a new metro tunnel deep beneath Moscow when he simply walked around a corner and disappeared for 11 minutes. His crew searched frantically, but the tunnel was a dead end with nowhere to go. When Viktor suddenly reappeared, stumbling out of the same spot where he'd vanished, he was covered in a strange metallic dust that no one could identify. But what made everyone freeze wasn't the dust. It was Viktor's eyes. They were completely white, like he'd gone blind, and he was screaming words in a language that didn't exist. Over the next 48 hours, his vision slowly returned, and when he could finally speak again, Viktor told a story so disturbing that the construction company immediately shut down the entire project. He claimed he'd walked into the year 3505 and seen something that changed him forever. Now, imagine yourself working 40 meters underground in a tunnel that's barely lit, knowing there's absolutely no way in or out except the way you came. That was Viktor's reality on March 17, 2019. He was a 34-year-old construction veteran with 12 years of experience, a man known for his calm demeanor and reliability. His foreman, Dmitry Volkov, later told investigators that Viktor was the last person who would panic or fabricate stories. That morning, Viktor had been drilling into a section of rock when he told his crew he needed to check something around the corner. He walked approximately 15 meters down the tunnel, turned the corner, and that's when he vanished into thin air. His crew heard no sound, no scream, nothing. When they ran after him just seconds later, the tunnel was empty. But here's what makes this absolutely insane. The tunnel was a dead end. There were solid rock walls on 3 sides, and the only exit was behind them. Viktor had nowhere to go, and yet he was simply gone. The crew searched every centimeter of that space, convinced he'd somehow gotten trapped or injured. For 11 minutes, they tore through that tunnel in absolute panic. Then, without any warning, Viktor stumbled out from the exact corner where he'd disappeared, and what they saw froze them cold. His work clothes were covered in a fine metallic dust that shimmered under the tunnel lights like nothing they'd ever seen. Chemical analysis later showed it contained elements that shouldn't exist in that combination. But far more disturbing were his eyes, completely white, no pupils, no iris, just pure white. And Viktor was screaming in a language that sounded almost mechanical, words that didn't belong to any known human language. Now, here's where it gets even more terrifying. When Viktor's vision finally returned 2 days later, and he could speak coherently again, he described what happened to him during those 11 minutes. He said the moment he turned that corner, he felt like he'd been pulled through a freezing cold membrane. Suddenly, he wasn't in the tunnel anymore. He was standing in what looked like the same location, but 1,500 years in the future. The tunnel had become part of a massive underground city that stretched for miles in every direction. But the city wasn't abandoned. Viktor claimed there were beings there, and he used that word specifically. Beings, not people. He said they looked almost human but wrong in ways he couldn't fully explain. Their movements were too smooth, their skin had a faint metallic sheen, and their eyes were exactly like his had become, completely white. Viktor told doctors at Moscow's Central Clinical Hospital that these beings surrounded him immediately as if they'd been expecting him. They didn't speak, but he could somehow understand what they wanted. They were studying him, he said, examining him like he was some kind of artifact from the ancient past. He described machines that scanned his body with lights, and that's when the metallic dust got on his clothes. Then, just as suddenly as he had arrived, he felt himself being pushed back through that same freezing membrane, and he was in the tunnel again, stumbling and blind and screaming. The construction company's official explanation? Victor suffered a psychological break caused by toxic gas exposure in the tunnel. They claimed he wandered into a sealed-off section they didn't know existed, inhaled something that caused hallucinations, and his whitened eyes were a temporary reaction to chemicals. Absolutely convenient, right? But here's what they couldn't explain: the metallic dust on his clothes that contained elements that don't naturally occur together on Earth. The fact that tunnel schematics showed no sealed sections anywhere near where he vanished. And most damning of all, the security footage. The tunnel had a single camera that captured the corner where Victor disappeared. On that footage, you can see him walk toward the corner, and then he simply fades away like he's dissolving into nothing. No gas cloud, no collapse, no rational explanation whatsoever. Pretty creepy. So, what really happened to Viktor Markov in that tunnel beneath Moscow? Did he actually slip through some kind of temporal gateway and spend what felt like hours in the year 3505, while only 11 minutes passed in our time? And if those beings he described are real, were they examining him because time travelers from the past are so rare that we're like archaeological treasures to them? Or is there a more terrifying possibility that these temporal slips are becoming more common, and the beings from 3505 are actively pulling people forward to study us? Think about this for a moment. If Victor's story is true, then somewhere deep underground in Moscow, there might still be a thin spot in time where our world and the year 3505 touch each other. And if you walked through it, would you have the strength to come back? An absolutely chilling thought. On a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning in August 2021, Sarah Chen left her apartment in Singapore for her usual 6 a.m. jog through the botanical gardens. Surveillance cameras captured her entering the park, but she never came out. For exactly 7 minutes, Sarah Chen didn't exist anywhere on Earth. Search teams found no trace of her until she suddenly appeared in the exact same spot where she'd vanished, collapsed on the jogging path. But Sarah wasn't the same person who had started that jog. Her fitness tracker had recorded 3 years of heart rate data in those 7 minutes. Her running shoes were worn down to nothing, as if she'd run thousands of miles. And when she woke up in the hospital, she spoke with an accent she'd never had before and kept asking why everyone looked so primitive. Sarah claimed she had somehow fallen through time while jogging and spent what felt like 3 full years running through the streets of a city in the year 3505 before being violently pulled back to 2021. Now imagine this. You're a 29-year-old software engineer who jogs the exact same route every single morning at exactly 6 a.m. Your life is structured, predictable, safe. That was Sarah Chen. She'd been running through Singapore's botanical gardens for 4 years without incident. Her friends described her as methodical, logical, someone who didn't believe in anything supernatural. On the morning of August 10th, 2021, she kissed her girlfriend Maya goodbye, grabbed her phone and fitness tracker, and headed out for what should have been a normal 45-minute jog through the gardens. The park's security cameras caught her entering through the main gate at exactly 6:03 a.m., wearing her distinctive bright yellow running jacket. That was the last normal moment of Sarah Chen's life. At 6:10 a.m., exactly 7 minutes after she entered, joggers found Sarah collapsed face down on the path near the Swan Lake area of the gardens. But here's what made absolutely no sense. Multiple witnesses had been jogging that same path during those 7 minutes, and not a single person had seen Sarah. The path is narrow, well-lit, and heavily trafficked at that hour. There's simply no way she could have been there without being noticed. And yet, when Marcus Tan, a regular morning jogger, rounded the bend at 6:10 a.m., there she was, appearing out of thin air and collapsing onto the pavement as if she'd been dropped from somewhere else entirely. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, and what they discovered sent chills through everyone present. Sarah's body showed signs of extreme physical exertion and malnutrition, as if she'd been running non-stop for days without food or water. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her skin was severely dehydrated, and she'd lost approximately 12 kilograms. But she'd only been missing for 7 minutes. Absolutely insane, right? Then they noticed her running shoes. Sarah had put on brand new Nike running shoes that morning. Maya confirmed she'd bought them just 2 days earlier, and Sarah had worn them exactly once. But when paramedics looked at her feet, the shoes were completely destroyed, worn through at the soles, the fabric torn and aged as if Sarah had run thousands upon thousands of miles in them. Now, here's where it gets truly disturbing. Sarah's fitness tracker told a story that should have been impossible. The device had recorded 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days of continuous heart rate data. It showed her running every single day, sleeping in what appeared to be short intervals, and experiencing stress levels that spiked repeatedly as if she was constantly fleeing from something. Technology experts from Samsung, the manufacturer of her fitness tracker, examined the device at National University Hospital and confirmed the data was authentic and unmanipulated. They had absolutely no explanation for how 3 years of data could be recorded in 7 minutes. But what made Sarah's case explode into international news was what happened when she regained consciousness. She didn't recognize anyone at first. She spoke English, but with a strange accent that linguists later described as a fusion of multiple languages that didn't exist yet. When her girlfriend Maya tried to comfort her, Sarah looked at her with confusion and said something that froze everyone in the room. "Why are you all so primitive? Where are the sky paths?" She kept asking about transportation systems that didn't exist, buildings she claimed should be there, and kept saying she needed to get back to her sector before she was marked as missing. For the first 48 hours, Sarah genuinely believed she was still in the year 3505 and that she'd somehow been transported into the past. When psychiatrists finally helped Sarah understand she was back in 2021, she broke down completely. She told doctors at the Institute of Mental Health that the moment she'd rounded a curve in the jogging path, reality had simply folded. 1 second she was running through the botanical gardens, and the next she was running through a city she didn't recognize, a Singapore that had transformed into something unrecognizable. She described massive towers that stretched beyond the clouds, streets that moved on their own, and transportation pods that flew through transparent tubes in the sky. Sarah said she spent 3 full years trying to find a way back, running through that future city every day, searching for someone who could help her. She claimed people in 3505 treated her like a curiosity, someone who'd accidentally slipped through a temporal crack, and while some tried to help her, others wanted to study her. The official explanation from Singapore's authorities: Sarah experienced a severe dissociative episode triggered by stress, possibly combined with an undiagnosed medical condition. They claimed she collapsed, had a seizure that lasted several minutes, and her traumatized brain created an elaborate false memory to cope with the experience. As for the fitness tracker data and the destroyed shoes, they suggested a technical malfunction and said the shoes must have been damaged beforehand without anyone noticing. Extremely convenient, wouldn't you say? But here's what they couldn't explain. Sarah's blood tests showed vitamin deficiencies consistent with chronic malnutrition over months or years. Her muscle tissue had deteriorated in ways that take years to develop, and her bone density had decreased significantly, all in 7 minutes. So, what really happened to Sarah Chen during her morning jog through Singapore's botanical gardens? Did she actually slip through a crack in time and spend 3 years running through the streets of the year 3505? And if so, why did time pass so differently for her? 3 years for Sarah, but only 7 minutes for everyone else. Think about this. If Sarah's story is true, then somewhere in that park, there's a point where our world touches the year 3505, where you could be jogging 1 second and find yourself 1,500 years in the future the next. And here's the truly terrifying question. If Sarah could accidentally fall forward through time, could someone from 3505 accidentally fall backward into our time? Could they be here right now, walking among us, trying desperately to get back home? Pretty creepy when you think about it that way. Daniel Reeves was an amateur photographer exploring an abandoned psychiatric hospital in upstate New York in October 2017 when his camera captured something that should have been absolutely impossible. In one photo, standing in a hallway behind him, was Daniel himself, but decades older, wearing clothes that looked like nothing from our time. The photograph was analyzed by multiple experts who confirmed it hadn't been manipulated. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. 3 days after taking that photo, Daniel disappeared from his apartment for 6 hours. When he returned, he was unconscious and had aged approximately 20 years in those 6 hours. His hair had gone completely gray, his skin was weathered, and his body showed signs of extreme physical trauma. When Daniel finally woke up, he was absolutely terrified. and claimed he'd been pulled into the year 3505, where he lived for what felt like 2 full decades before something yanked him back. He said he'd been trying to warn his younger self, and that's why he appeared in his own photograph. Now, imagine you're scrolling through photos on your camera and you see yourself in the background of a shot, but it's not you as you are now. It's you 20 years older, staring directly at the camera with a look of absolute desperation on your face. That's exactly what happened to Daniel Reeves, a 32-year-old graphic designer from Albany who spent his weekends photographing abandoned buildings. On October 14, 2017, Daniel drove to the Willard Psychiatric Center, a massive abandoned asylum near Seneca Lake that had been closed since 1995. He'd been there before and knew the building was structurally unsound but legally accessible to photographers. That afternoon, armed with his Canon 5D Mark IV, he was documenting the decay of the third-floor hallway, a long corridor with peeling paint and broken windows that let in streams of dusty afternoon light. Daniel was working alone, as he always did, using a tripod and timer to capture long exposure shots of the hallway. He set up his camera, pressed the timer, and walked down the corridor to get out of the frame. The camera clicked, capturing the image. Daniel packed up and went home, thinking nothing unusual had happened. But when he uploaded the photos to his computer that evening, one image stopped him cold. In the photograph, standing about 40 feet behind where his camera had been positioned, was a man staring directly into the lens. And that man was unmistakably Daniel himself, just decades older. His face was weathered and lined, his hair completely white, and he was wearing some kind of silver suit that looked almost metallic, nothing like any clothing Daniel had ever seen. At first, Daniel convinced himself it had to be a technical glitch, maybe a double exposure or some kind of reflection. But here's what makes this absolutely insane. The figure wasn't transparent or ghostly. It was solid, real, casting a shadow on the wall behind it. The lighting on the older Daniel matched perfectly with the lighting in the rest of the photograph. And most disturbing of all, the expression on the older Daniel's face was one of pure terror mixed with urgency, as if he was trying to communicate something desperately important. Daniel took the photograph to 3 different forensic image analysts, including Dr. Sarah Martinez at the Rochester Institute of Technology's School of Photographic Arts. All 3 confirmed the same thing. The image showed absolutely no signs of manipulation, no layering, no digital alterations whatsoever. Now here's where this case becomes truly terrifying. 3 days after discovering the photograph, on the evening of October 17, 2017, Daniel was in his apartment watching television when his girlfriend Emma called him at 8:47 p.m. They talked for about 5 minutes. Everything was normal, and then she said goodbye. At 8:52 p.m., Emma received a text from Daniel's phone that simply said, "It's happening, I was right, I'm certain." The message cut off mid-word. Emma immediately called back but got no answer. Concerned, she drove to his apartment and let herself in with her key at 9:15 p.m. The apartment was empty. Daniel's phone was on the couch, still unlocked, the unfinished message on the screen. His wallet, keys, and jacket were all there. He'd vanished from a locked apartment with no way out. For 6 hours, Daniel Reeves simply didn't exist. Emma called the police, who searched the apartment building and found nothing. But then, at 2:47 a.m., Emma, who had been waiting in Daniel's apartment, heard a sound like a loud crack of thunder. Even though the night was clear, she ran to the bedroom and found Daniel collapsed on the floor, unconscious and barely breathing. But the man lying there didn't look like the Daniel who had disappeared 6 hours earlier. His hair had turned completely gray, his face was deeply lined with wrinkles, his hands were covered in scars, and he looked like he'd aged 20 years in a single night. Paramedics rushed him to Albany Medical Center, where doctors were absolutely baffled by what they found. Daniel's body told a story of decades of aging compressed into 6 hours. His cells showed advanced aging markers, his bone density had decreased significantly, his muscle mass had deteriorated, and he had scar tissue that looked years old. When he finally regained consciousness 14 hours later, Daniel was in a state of complete shock. He kept saying over and over, "I tried to warn myself. I tried to stop it." When he was finally calm enough to explain, Daniel told a story that made everyone question his sanity. He said that at 8:52 p.m., he'd felt an overwhelming pull, like invisible hands grabbing him, and suddenly he wasn't in his apartment anymore. He was standing in the exact same location, but in the year 3505. And he spent what felt like 20 full years trapped in that future, desperately trying to find a way back. Daniel described living 2 decades in that future world, aging naturally, suffering injuries that became the scars doctors found on his body. He said he discovered that temporal rifts were opening more frequently between 2017 and 3505, and when he learned one would open in the Willard Psychiatric Center on October 14th, he went there, hoping to encounter his younger self and warn him. That's why he appeared in the photograph. He was trying to warn himself not to be at his apartment on October 17th, trying to prevent himself from being pulled forward, but he failed, and he ended up living through the very timeline he'd tried to prevent. Skeptics, of course, have their explanations. They claim Daniel suffered a psychotic break, possibly triggered by carbon monoxide poisoning or a hidden gas leak in his apartment. They say his rapid aging was a rare genetic disorder called progeria that suddenly activated, and the photograph was either a hoax or a case of mistaken identity. As for his disappearance, they suggest he wandered out of his apartment in a fugue state, experienced his medical crisis somewhere else, and somehow made it back home. Pretty convenient how they can explain away everything, right? But here's what they can't explain. Daniel's DNA showed telomere shortening, consistent with 20 years of aging. His dental record showed enamel wear that takes decades to develop. And most damning of all, Daniel had specific memories of historical events from years 2017 through 3505 that he described in detail to psychiatrists. Events that haven't happened yet. So, what really happened to Daniel Reeves? Did he actually photograph his future self, trying to warn him about a temporal kidnapping? Did he truly live 20 years in the span of 6 hours, trapped in the year 3505? And here's the question that should terrify you. If Daniel's older self could travel back to 2017 to try to warn his younger self, does that mean we all might have future versions of ourselves trying desperately to change our timelines right now? Could you have an older version of yourself standing behind you at this very moment, trying to warn you about something terrible that's about to happen? Think about that the next time you take a photograph and check the background. You might just see yourself staring back, decades older, with a warning you can't hear. Absolutely chilling. Captain James Mitchell had been flying commercial aircraft for 15 years without a single incident until the night of November 4th, 2018. His flight from Chicago to Boston entered what appeared to be a routine cloud bank at 35,000 feet. But for exactly 4 minutes, the aircraft completely vanished from radar. Air traffic control lost all contact. The plane simply didn't exist. Then, just as suddenly, it reappeared, and Captain Mitchell made an emergency landing, visibly shaking and barely able to speak. But here's what made this case explode into international mystery. Every single passenger and crew member, except Captain Mitchell, had no memory of those 4 minutes. Their watches and phones showed no time had passed, but Mitchell's watch had jumped forward by 18 years. And when investigators examined the cockpit, they found Mitchell had frantically written coordinates and dates all over the flight manual, along with desperate warnings about something he called the collapse. Mitchell claimed that for those 4 minutes, he had been flying his plane through the skies of the year 3505, and what he saw there made him realize humanity's time was running out. Now, imagine being responsible for 189 passengers at 35,000 feet, when reality itself suddenly breaks apart around you. Captain James Mitchell was a 43-year-old pilot with an impeccable record, known among his colleagues at United Airlines as calm under pressure and by the book. He'd logged over 12,000 flight hours without a single safety violation. On the evening of November 4th, 2018, he was commanding Flight 2847 from Chicago O'Hare to Boston Logan, a routine 2-hour flight he'd flown hundreds of times before. Weather conditions were normal. The aircraft was a Boeing 737-800 in perfect mechanical condition. And at 8:47 p.m. Eastern Time, everything was proceeding exactly as planned. His co-pilot, First Officer Rebecca Torres, would later tell investigators that Mitchell had been in good spirits, talking about his daughter's upcoming college graduation. At 8:51 p.m., as the aircraft cruised at 35,000 feet over upstate New York, they encountered what appeared to be a standard cumulus cloud formation. Captain Mitchell radioed Boston Center Air Traffic Control with a routine position report. ATC controller David Chen acknowledged the transmission, and Mitchell began to enter the cloud bank. But here's where everything went wrong. The moment Flight 2847 entered that cloud, it disappeared completely from radar. Not just primary radar, but also the aircraft's transponder signal vanished. Air traffic control tried to make contact. No response. They tried emergency frequencies. Nothing. For exactly 4 minutes, Flight 2847, with 189 passengers and 6 crew members aboard, simply ceased to exist anywhere on Earth. At 8:55 p.m., the aircraft suddenly reappeared on radar in the exact same position where it had vanished, as if it had never been gone at all. But immediately, ATC knew something was catastrophically wrong. Captain Mitchell's voice came over the radio, and controller David Chen later described it as the voice of a man who'd seen the end of the world. Mitchell was screaming into the radio, declaring an emergency, saying he needed to land immediately, that something impossible had just happened. His voice was shaking so badly that Chen initially thought the aircraft had suffered a structural failure. Mitchell managed to land the plane at Albany International Airport at 9:23 p.m. When airport emergency crews reached the aircraft, they found Captain Mitchell slumped in his seat, tears streaming down his face, completely unresponsive to questions. But here's what makes this case absolutely insane. When investigators interviewed the passengers and crew, not a single person except Mitchell remembered anything unusual happening. First Officer Torres said they entered the cloud, flew through it, and came out the other side. The whole experience lasted maybe 20 seconds in her memory. Passengers reported the same thing. Normal flight, no turbulence, nothing strange. Their phones, watches, and the aircraft's internal clocks all showed that those 4 minutes had never happened. The flight data recorder showed continuous normal flight with no gap. But Captain Mitchell's watch, a Rolex Submariner his wife had given him for their 15th anniversary, showed a date of March 17, 2036, 18 years in the future. Absolutely no one could explain that. Now, here's where it gets even more disturbing. When FAA investigators examined the cockpit, they found that Mitchell had used a pen to frantically write all over the flight manual, the navigation charts, even on the instrument panel itself. The writings were coordinates, dates, and warnings scrawled in Mitchell's handwriting, but increasingly frantic and barely legible. One message written across the emergency procedures checklist read, "The collapse, 3482, they're not ready, warn them." Another note contained GPS coordinates that pointed to locations that didn't exist yet, buildings that hadn't been constructed. And strangest of all, Mitchell had written a series of dates between 2036 and 3505, as if marking waypoints in time. When Mitchell finally spoke to investigators 3 days later, after being held for psychiatric evaluation at Albany Medical Center, he told a story that sounded like science fiction, but that he swore was absolutely true. He said the moment his aircraft entered that cloud, the cockpit instruments went haywire, and then everything outside the windows changed. Instead of darkness and clouds, he could see a sky filled with aircraft, but they weren't like any planes he'd ever seen. They were massive, translucent, moving in formations that defied physics. Below, instead of the dark landscape of New York, he saw a city that glowed with light stretching to the horizon in every direction. And his co-pilot, his passengers, they were all frozen in place like statues, completely unaware that anything was happening. Mitchell claimed he flew through that impossible sky for what felt like hours, though his instruments showed only 4 minutes passing. He said he could see other aircraft, and in some of them, he could see pilots staring at him in shock, as if he was the anomaly in their world. He frantically tried to figure out where he was, and when he checked his navigation systems, they showed the date as July 15th, 3505. Mitchell said he panicked and began writing down everything he could see, every coordinate, every detail, knowing somehow that he needed to record this before it was over. And then he started seeing things in that future sky that terrified him. Massive dark structures that seemed to be tearing the sky itself apart. What he called the collapse, like reality was breaking down. The official explanation from the FAA and NTSB, Captain Mitchell experienced a severe psychological episode, possibly triggered by undiagnosed mental health issues or a reaction to medication. They suggested the 4-minute radar gap was a technical glitch affecting multiple systems simultaneously, which they admitted was extremely rare but not impossible. As for Mitchell's watch showing 18 years in the future, they claimed it malfunctioned due to electromagnetic interference from the cloud, despite the fact that Rolex mechanical watches don't have electronics that could be affected that way. Pretty convenient, right? But here's what they couldn't explain. Mitchell's writings included specific architectural descriptions of buildings that were later proposed in urban development plans in 2019 and 2020, years after his experience. He described technologies that researchers are only now beginning to develop. How could a psychological break produce accurate predictions? So, what really happened to Flight 2847 in that cloud over New York? Did Captain Mitchell actually fly his aircraft through a temporal rift and spend 4 minutes piloting through the skies of the year 3505 while his passengers and crew remained frozen in our time? And what about these warnings he kept writing about the collapse? Was he trying to warn us about something that's going to happen to humanity in the future? Think about this for a moment. If Mitchell really saw the future and it terrified him so much that he broke down completely, what could possibly be waiting for us in the year 3505? And here's the truly unsettling part. Mitchell's watch didn't just jump to some random future date. It jumped to 2036, exactly 18 years forward, as if he'd somehow been aging during those 4 minutes while traveling through time. Could those 4 minutes have been compressed time? 18 years of flying through different eras before reaching 3505? And if so, what happened to Mitchell during those 18 years that he can't remember? Pretty terrifying when you realize that somewhere in our skies, there might be clouds that aren't just clouds, but doorways into times we're not meant to see. Makes you wonder about every flight you've ever taken, doesn't it? On what should have been the happiest day of her life, June 12, 2020, Emma Rodriguez vanished during her wedding reception in Barcelona. Security footage shows her stepping into the venue's garden, and then she simply ceases to exist for 9 minutes. Over 200 wedding guests searched for her, but when Emma reappeared in the exact same spot, she wasn't wearing her wedding dress anymore. She was dressed in a silver jumpsuit that seemed to be made of a material that hadn't been invented yet. Her wedding ring was gone, but she had a different ring on her finger, one engraved with a date, July 15th, 3505. Emma was rushed to the hospital in a state of complete shock, and when she could finally speak, she told her family something that made them question her sanity. She claimed she'd been pulled into the future, lived an entire life in the year 3505, fell in love, got married to someone else, and then was suddenly ripped away from that future life and thrown back to her original wedding day. The ring, she said, was from her husband in the year 3505, and she couldn't stop crying because she'd left him behind. Now imagine planning your dream wedding for 2 years, walking down the aisle, saying your vows, and then in the middle of your reception, your entire reality shatters. Emma Rodriguez was a 28-year-old architect from Barcelona who'd been with her fiancé Carlos Mendez for 6 years. Friends described their relationship as perfect, the kind of love story everyone dreams about. Their wedding at the historic Casa Batlló, one of Gaudi's masterpieces, was elegant and intimate with 200 guests. Everything was going exactly as planned. Emma and Carlos had their first dance at 9:30 p.m., cut the cake at 10:15 p.m., and by 10:45 p.m., Emma told Carlos she needed a moment of fresh air. She walked toward the venue's rooftop garden, a beautiful space overlooking the city lights of Barcelona. Security cameras captured her, stepping through the glass doors at exactly 10:47 p.m., and then something absolutely impossible happened. The garden is completely enclosed, surrounded by walls on 3 sides and the building on the 4th. There's only one entrance, the door Emma walked through, and it was in full view of the security camera. But Emma never came back through that door. When Carlos went to check on her at 10:51 p.m., just 4 minutes later, she was gone. He searched the garden, calling her name, and found nothing. The garden is small, maybe 30 feet by 40 feet, with decorative plants and a few benches. There was literally nowhere to hide. Carlos ran back inside, panicking, and within minutes, the entire wedding party was searching. They checked every room in the venue, every bathroom, every closet. Over 200 guests spread throughout the building looking for Emma. For 9 minutes, she had simply vanished. At exactly 10:56 p.m., Emma's maid of honor, Sofia Ortega, was searching the garden again when she heard what she described as a sound like air being sucked through a straw. And then Emma was suddenly standing there, appearing out of thin air right in the center of the garden. But the woman who appeared wasn't the bride who had walked through those doors 9 minutes earlier. Emma's $15,000 custom wedding dress was gone. Instead, she was wearing a one-piece silver jumpsuit that looked like it was made of liquid metal, form-fitting and seamless, with no visible zippers or buttons. The material shimmered under the garden lights in a way that fabric simply doesn't move, and Emma herself was different. Her wedding makeup was gone, her hair was completely different, styled in a way she'd never worn it before. She was barefoot, and most shocking of all, she was sobbing uncontrollably and screaming a name, "Adrian! I need to get back to Adrian." Now, here's where this gets absolutely heartbreaking and terrifying at the same time. When paramedics arrived and tried to calm Emma down, she kept saying things that made no sense. She didn't recognize her own wedding. She looked at Carlos like he was a stranger and actually flinched away from him when he tried to hold her. She kept asking what year it was, and when people told her it was 2020, she started hyperventilating and saying, No, that's impossible. I've been gone for 7 years. Adrian is waiting for me. Our daughter is waiting for me." Think about how devastating this must have been for Carlos, watching the woman he just married talk about having a husband and child with someone else. At Hospital Clínic de Barcelona, doctors initially thought Emma was having a severe dissociative episode, or a psychotic break triggered by wedding stress. But then, they examined the silver jumpsuit, and their explanations started falling apart. Material scientists from the Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya analyzed the fabric and confirmed it was made from a polymer blend that doesn't exist in any database. The material had properties that shouldn't be possible. It was temperature regulating, self-cleaning, and nearly indestructible. They couldn't cut it, couldn't burn it, couldn't even identify all the elements in its composition. But what made this case explode internationally was the ring. Emma's wedding ring from Carlos was gone, but on her finger was a different ring, platinum with a design that jewelers said they'd never seen before. And engraved inside in microscopic lettering was a date, July 15th, 3505, and a name, Adrian Castellanos. When Emma finally calmed down enough to tell her full story 2 days later, she described an experience that sounded like a complete life lived in. Fast forward. She said the moment she stepped into that garden, she felt like she was being pulled by an invisible force. The garden disappeared, and suddenly she was standing in the exact same location, but 1,500 years in the future. The building was gone, replaced by a massive structure made of glass and light. And standing there, looking just as shocked as she was a man named Adrian Castellanos. Emma claimed she spent 7 years in that future, unable to find a way back to 2020. She said Adrian had also been pulled from his time, from the year 2847, and they were both trapped in 3505 together. They fell in love, got married in that future world, and even had a daughter named Sophia. Emma described a life that felt completely real. Birthday celebrations, arguments, quiet mornings, all the normal moments of a marriage. And then, without warning, on what she thought was just another ordinary day, she felt that same pulling sensation, and she was ripped away from that life and thrown back to her wedding reception. Skeptics have, of course, tried to explain this away. They say Emma had a psychotic break triggered by wedding stress, wandered out of the garden through a door that wasn't being monitored, changed her clothes somewhere, and returned 9 minutes later with false memories implanted by her traumatized mind. As for the impossible jumpsuit and ring, they suggest she'd hidden them beforehand as part of an elaborate plan, though they can't explain why she would do that, or how she obtained materials that don't exist yet. Pretty weak explanations, right? But here's what they absolutely cannot explain. Emma's body showed signs of having given birth. Medical scans revealed changes to her pelvis and uterine wall consistent with childbirth, even though Emma had never been pregnant before her wedding day. Her skin showed sun damage and aging consistent with 7 years of life, subtle but measurable changes. And most damning of all, DNA tests on cells from the jumpsuit revealed the presence of 2 different genetic profiles, Emma's and an unknown male profile that didn't match anyone in any database. So, What really happened to Emma Rodriguez in that garden in Barcelona? Did she actually slip through time and live 7 full years in the year 3505, falling in love and starting a family before being violently torn away and returned to her original timeline? And if so, what happened to Adrian and their daughter? Are they still in 3505, wondering where Emma went, trying to find a way to bring her back? Imagine loving someone, building a life together, having a child, and then one day your partner just vanishes, pulled backward through time by forces neither of you understand. Think about Emma, who has to go on living in 2020, knowing that somewhere in the future, she has a husband and daughter who are waiting for her, who think she abandoned them. And here's the question that should keep you up at night. Emma was gone for 9 minutes in our time, but lived 7 years in the future. If time can move that differently across these temporal rifts, how many lives could you live in just a few seconds? Could you fall through time right now, live an entire lifetime in another era, and return before anyone even notices you're gone? Would you even remember? Or would it feel like a dream that fades the moment you wake up? Absolutely heartbreaking when you think about it that way. Mount Shasta in Northern California has been the center of strange disappearances and paranormal activity for decades. But what happened to Michael Torres in September 2016 is perhaps the most documented and terrifying case. Michael was hiking alone when he discovered what he described as a shimmer in the air near a remote cave. The moment he stepped through this shimmer, he vanished for 12 hours. A massive search and rescue operation was launched, but Michael was nowhere to be found on the mountain. Then, just before dawn, he stumbled into a ranger station at the base of the mountain, completely disoriented and speaking in fragmented sentences. His clothes were torn and burned, his backpack was missing, and he had scars all over his body that looked like they'd been healing for months. But Michael had only been gone for 12 hours. When he finally calmed down enough to explain, he said he'd walked through some kind of portal and spent what felt like 8 months living in the year 3505, trying desperately to find a way back. The scars, he said, were from the experiments they performed on him when they discovered he was from the past. Now, imagine hiking through one of the most mysterious mountains in America and stumbling across something that looks like reality itself is glitching. Michael Torres was a 31-year-old wilderness guide from Sacramento who knew Mount Shasta intimately. He'd hiked these trails hundreds of times and was experienced enough to handle solo expeditions. On September 23, 2016, Michael set out for what should have been a routine day hike to explore some of the mountain's lesser-known caves around the 8,000-foot elevation mark. He'd told his roommate Jake Brennan he'd be back by 6 p.m. Mount Shasta has a reputation among paranormal researchers as a hotspot for strange phenomena. Stories of disappearances, time distortions, and alleged underground civilizations have surrounded this 14,179-foot volcanic peak for generations. But Michael wasn't looking for anything paranormal. He was simply documenting caves for a trail guide he was writing. At approximately 2:30 p.m., Michael was exploring an area near Panther Meadows when he noticed something that shouldn't exist. He described it as a shimmer in the air about 20 feet from a cave entrance, like heat waves rising from hot pavement, except the temperature was only 55 degrees, and there was nothing that should be generating that effect. Michael said curiosity got the better of him. He approached the shimmer slowly and reached out to touch it. His hand went through and he felt what he described as an intense cold that shot up his arm. And then, against every instinct telling him not to, Michael stepped through. The moment he crossed that threshold, he vanished completely from our timeline. When Michael didn't return by 8 p.m., his roommate Jake contacted the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Office, who immediately launched a search and rescue operation. By 10 p.m., teams were combing the mountain with dogs, thermal imaging equipment, and helicopters. Mount Shasta's terrain is dangerous, with deep crevasses, unstable rock formations, and areas where people can easily become trapped. The search continued through the night and into the next day. They found Michael's car at the trailhead. They found his water bottle on the trail, dropped near the Panther Meadows area, but they found absolutely no trace of Michael himself. It was as if he'd evaporated into thin air. Search teams covered every square foot of the area where his water bottle was found, but there were no footprints leading away, no signs of struggle, nothing. At 5:47 a.m. on September 24th, just as the search teams were preparing for their second full day, Ranger Station 3 at the mountain's base received a visitor. Michael Torres stumbled through the door, barely able to stand, and collapsed on the floor. Park Ranger Diana Foster was working the early shift and immediately called for medical assistance. But when she got a good look at Michael, she was absolutely shocked. His hiking clothes were shredded and burned in places, with scorch marks that looked like they came from intense heat. His boots were worn down to almost nothing, as if he'd walked hundreds of miles. His face was covered in scratches that were partially healed, and most disturbing of all, he had what looked like surgical scars on his arms, chest, and neck. Fresh scars, but not fresh enough. These scars had the appearance of being several weeks or months old, partially healed with scar tissue already forming. When paramedics arrived and tried to assess Michael, he was speaking in broken sentences that barely made sense. He kept saying things like, "I tried to come back sooner, and they wouldn't let me leave until they understood where I came from. And most chillingly, they wanted to know how a primitive could have found the threshold." Medical staff at Mercy Medical Center in Mount Shasta City were baffled by Michael's condition. Physically, his body told a story of months of malnutrition, physical stress, and trauma. He'd lost 32 pounds. His muscle mass had deteriorated significantly. His vitamin and mineral levels showed chronic deficiency. But he'd only been missing for 12 hours. Absolutely insane, right? Then there were the scars. Doctors documented at least 17 distinct scars on Michael's body, including what looked like precise incisions consistent with surgical procedures. But these weren't random injuries. They were methodical, placed in locations that suggested someone had been studying Michael's physiology. Now, here's where Michael's story becomes truly terrifying. When he was finally coherent enough to give a full account 3 days later, he described an experience that lasted 8 months from his perspective. He said, stepping through that shimmer was like being pulled underwater, and when he emerged on the other side, he was no longer on Mount Shasta in 2016. He was standing in the same geographical location, but in the year 3505. The mountain itself had been transformed into something he could barely comprehend. Massive structures were built into the rock, towering constructions that seemed to defy gravity. And almost immediately he was surrounded by beings that looked human, but weren't quite human. Their skin had a faint luminescence, their eyes were larger, and they moved with an unsettling, fluid grace. Michael claimed these beings were fascinated by him, treating him like an archaeological discovery. They took him to what he described as a research facility built inside the mountain, where they studied him for months. He said they performed tests on him, taking tissue samples, scanning his body with lights that burned his skin, examining his biology like he was a specimen. Michael tried to communicate, tried to explain he needed to go back, but they seemed more interested in understanding how he'd accessed what they called the threshold. He said they showed him images of other humans who had accidentally crossed through temporal rifts, suggesting this phenomenon happened more often than we realize. And after 8 months of captivity, they finally opened the portal again and pushed him through, sending him back to almost the exact moment he'd left, though 12 hours had passed instead of the seconds he'd expected. The official explanation from authorities: Michael experienced a severe psychological episode, possibly triggered by altitude sickness or dehydration, wandered off the trail, fell into a ravine or cave system where he was trapped for 12 hours, and his traumatized mind created an elaborate false memory to cope with the experience. As for the scars and weight loss, they suggested he'd injured himself during his confused state, and that the weight loss was from dehydration and stress. Extremely convenient, wouldn't you say? But here's what they couldn't explain. Michael's injuries included geometric patterns of scar tissue that doctors said looked like precise laser incisions, technology that didn't exist in 2016. His clothing had burn marks that forensic analysis showed were caused by directed energy at temperatures that would require industrial equipment. And most damning, Michael's blood work showed traces of synthetic compounds that weren't in any medical database. Substances that organic chemists at UC Davis said appeared to be some kind of advanced pharmaceutical agents. So, what really happened to Michael Torres on Mount Shasta? Did he actually step through a temporal portal and spend 8 months as a captive research subject in the year 3505? And if so, why did those future beings study him so intensely? Were they trying to understand how people from our time could access their era? Or were they conducting experiments for some darker purpose? Think about this for a moment. Mount Shasta has been the site of dozens of unexplained disappearances over the decades. What if some of those missing people didn't die in hiking accidents? What if they stepped through the same shimmer Michael found and ended up trapped in the future, unable to find their way back? And here's the truly unsettling question. Michael said the beings in 3505 showed him images of other time travelers they had captured. Could there be people from our time right now, living as prisoners in the year 3505, being studied like laboratory animals, with no way to escape? And what if that portal on Mount Shasta is still there, still active, waiting for the next curious hiker to step through? Would you be brave enough to walk through a shimmer in the air if you found one, knowing you might end up spending months or years in an alien future before being returned? Or knowing you might never come back at all? Pretty terrifying when you realize that portal could be anywhere, not just on Mount Shasta. Any shimmer in the air, any strange distortion you see, could be a doorway to the year 3505, and once you step through, there's no guarantee you'll ever make it home. David Park worked as a night security guard at a tech company's headquarters in Seoul, South Korea. On the night of February 3rd, 2022, he stepped into an elevator on the 15th floor to do his rounds. The elevator doors closed, but when they opened again 30 seconds later, David was gone. The elevator was empty. Security cameras inside the elevator showed him standing there one moment, and then he simply faded away like he was never there at all. For exactly 8 minutes, David Park didn't exist. Then the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, and David fell out, gasping for air and screaming. He had aged roughly 5 years in those 8 minutes. His hair was longer, his face was weathered, and he was covered in burn marks. When paramedics arrived, David kept repeating the same thing over and over. They're not human anymore. We're not human anymore in 3505. He claimed the elevator had somehow become a portal that transported him to the year 3505, where he was trapped in that same building, but in a future where everything had changed. He said he spent years trying to get back, and when he finally found the way, it burned him alive. Now, imagine working a quiet night shift in a modern office building, pressing an elevator button like you've done 1,000 times before, and suddenly finding yourself trapped 1,500 years in the future. David Park was a 37-year-old security guard who had worked at the Nexon Tower in Seoul's Gangnam district for 8 years without incident. He was known as reliable and thorough, a former military police officer who took his job seriously. The Nexon Tower is a gleaming 28-story building housing one of South Korea's largest gaming companies. On the night of February 3rd, 2022, David was doing his standard midnight rounds, checking that all floors were secure and all employees had left for the night. At 12:43 a.m., security footage shows him on the 15th floor, clipboard in hand, walking toward elevator B to continue his rounds on the upper floors. The elevator arrived, David stepped inside, pressed the button for the 20th floor, and the doors closed. Here's where everything went impossibly wrong. The elevator's internal security camera captured what happened next, and the footage is absolutely chilling. For the first 15 seconds, everything appears normal. David is standing in the elevator, checking his watch, looking at his clipboard. Then, at exactly 12:44:15 a.m., something changes. The air inside the elevator seems to shimmer, like heat distortion, but more pronounced. David looks up, clearly noticing something is wrong. He reaches for the emergency button, but before his hand touches it, he starts to fade. Not like he's walking away or moving out of frame. He literally becomes transparent, like he's dissolving into nothing. Within 3 seconds, David Park has completely vanished from the elevator, leaving it empty. The elevator continued to operate normally, responding to calls from other floors as if nothing had happened. Building security noticed David wasn't responding to radio calls, but they assumed his radio had died. It wasn't until 12:52 a.m., exactly 8 minutes after David had entered the elevator, that the real horror began. The elevator arrived at the ground floor lobby, the doors opened, and David Park fell out onto the marble floor, convulsing and screaming. But the man who fell out wasn't the same man who'd entered that elevator 8 minutes earlier. David looked like he'd aged 5 years. His black hair, which had been neatly trimmed, was now shoulder-length and streaked with gray. His face was gaunt and weathered, with deep lines around his eyes and mouth that hadn't been there before. His security uniform was burned and torn in places, with scorch marks that looked like they'd come from intense heat. But what made the lobby security team freeze in absolute horror were the burn marks covering David's exposed skin. His hands, neck, and face had burns that looked weeks old, already partially healed with scarred tissue forming. The building's medical team rushed to help him, but David was in a state of complete panic, thrashing and screaming words that made no sense. The building is alive. The walls see everything. They're not human anymore. When paramedics arrived at 12:58 a.m., David was still conscious but completely disoriented. He kept asking what year it was, and when they told him it was 2022, he started crying and saying, "I made it back. I actually made it back," over and over again. Now, here's where this case becomes absolutely terrifying. At Seoul National University Hospital, doctors discovered that David's body told a story of years, not minutes. He'd lost 18 kilograms, his muscle mass had deteriorated significantly, his teeth showed years of wear and decay, and his bones had density loss consistent with long-term calcium deficiency. Medical scans revealed healed fractures in his ribs and left arm that showed months of healing. His fingernails and toenails were thick and overgrown, as if they'd been growing unchecked for years. But David had only been missing for 8 minutes. Think about how impossible that is. Your body can't age 5 years in 8 minutes. It simply can't happen according to everything we understand about human biology. When David finally calmed down enough to give a coherent account 2 days later, what he described sent chills through everyone who heard it. He said that when the elevator doors closed on the 15th floor, he felt a sudden pressure change, like his ears popping during a flight. The elevator walls started to glow with a faint blue light, and then reality itself seemed to shift. When the doors opened again, he was still in an elevator, still in what appeared to be the same building, but everything was wrong. The elevator shaft had changed. Instead of normal walls, there were surfaces that seemed to pulse with light, almost organic looking. David said he stepped out onto the 15th floor, but it wasn't his 15th floor anymore. The entire building had been transformed into something he could barely comprehend. He described walls that moved and shifted, rooms that changed shape, and most disturbing of all, beings that looked human at first glance but wrong when you looked closer. David said their movements were too smooth, their skin had a strange quality like it wasn't quite flesh anymore, and their eyes reflected light in a way human eyes don't. He claimed he spent what felt like 5 full years trapped in that future version of the Nexon Tower, desperately trying to find a way back to his own time. He said the building itself seemed to be alive, aware of his presence, and the beings who inhabited it treated him like a fascinating anomaly. They would watch him, study him, but never speak to him directly. David described sleeping in abandoned rooms, scavenging for food in areas that seemed to produce some kind of synthetic nutrition, and constantly searching for the elevator that had brought him there. After years of exploration, David said he finally found what he was looking for: Elevator B on the 15th floor, exactly where his journey had started. But getting back wasn't easy. He said he had to time it perfectly, had to enter the elevator at the exact moment when some kind of temporal alignment occurred. When he finally stepped into that elevator and pressed the ground floor button, the entire space erupted in white-hot light. The light burned him, seared his skin, but he held his ground because he knew if he left that elevator, he'd be trapped in 3505 forever. And then, suddenly he was falling out onto the lobby floor of his own time, having aged 5 years, but returned to a moment only 8 minutes after he'd left. The official explanation from South Korean authorities and building management? David suffered a severe psychotic break, possibly caused by carbon monoxide exposure from faulty ventilation in the elevator shaft. They claimed he somehow exited the elevator on a floor without being seen by cameras, hid somewhere in the building for 8 minutes while experiencing hallucinations, and then injured himself before returning to the lobby. As for his aged appearance and years of physical deterioration, they suggested he had an undiagnosed condition called Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome, a genetic disorder that causes rapid aging, which supposedly activated suddenly. Pretty absurd explanation, right? But here's what they absolutely cannot explain. The elevator's internal camera showed David literally fading out of existence with no way to exit. The building's complete security system showed no trace of David anywhere in the structure during those 8 minutes. And most damning, genetic tests showed David did not have progeria or any condition that causes rapid aging. So, what really happened to David Park in that elevator in Seoul? Did he actually step through a temporal rift and spend 5 years trapped in the year 3505, living in a nightmarish future version of his own workplace? And what about his claim that humans aren't human anymore in 3505, that we've somehow transformed into something else? Think about this for a moment. David said the building itself was alive, that it was aware and watching. What if by the year 3505, we've merged with our technology so completely that the line between human and machine, between flesh and structure, has disappeared entirely? What if buildings are no longer just places we inhabit, but extensions of ourselves, living entities built from our transformed biology? And here's the truly terrifying question. If a simple elevator could become a portal to 3505, how many other everyday objects and spaces might be? Temporal gateways? That elevator still exists in the Nexon Tower. Building management sealed it off after David's incident, but it's still there. And according to maintenance workers who've had to service it, sometimes the elevator moves between floors on its own with no one inside, and sometimes the security camera catches that same shimmer David described, that heat wave distortion that seems to bend reality itself. Could that elevator still be opening portals to 3505? And if you stepped inside at exactly the wrong moment, would you find yourself trapped in a future where humanity has transformed into something that would terrify you? Would you have the strength and determination that David had to spend years searching for a way home? Or would you give up and remain in that alien future forever, slowly forgetting you were ever human at all? Absolutely horrifying when you think about how many elevators you step into every single day without a second thought. In July 2015, 17-year-old Hannah Peterson was shopping at an antique store in Portland, Oregon, when she found an ornate mirror that seemed to call to her. The store owner said the mirror had been there for decades, and no one ever bought it because people felt uncomfortable around it. Hannah looked into the mirror and touched its surface, and according to the security footage, she vanished the moment her finger made contact with the glass. For exactly 15 minutes, Hannah was gone. The mirror shattered into thousands of pieces the second she disappeared. When Hannah suddenly reappeared in the same spot, surrounded by broken glass, she was screaming and clawing at her own face. She had to be physically restrained. When doctors examined her, they found something impossible. Hannah's DNA had changed. There were genetic markers in her blood that didn't exist in any human database. Over the following weeks, Hannah slowly regained her ability to speak, and what she described was absolutely horrifying. She said she'd been pulled through the mirror into the year 3505, where she was used as a genetic experiment. They changed her, she said. They made her into something that wasn't fully human anymore. And the worst part? She said they're still watching her through reflections. Now, imagine being a normal teenager browsing through an antique store and finding an object that fundamentally rewrites your DNA and transforms you into something that's no longer entirely human. Hannah Peterson was a completely ordinary high school senior from Portland, planning to start college that fall to study biology. She was shopping at Timeless Treasures Antiques on Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard on July 18, 2015, looking for vintage decorations for her dorm room. The store's owner, 68-year-old Margaret Chen, had run the shop for 35 years and knew every item in her inventory. When Hannah started examining a large ornate mirror in the back corner, Margaret actually tried to steer her away from it. She later told police that the mirror had been in her store since 1987, and in all those years, something about it made customers uncomfortable. People would look at it, then quickly move away. Some said they felt watched. Others claimed their reflections looked wrong somehow, but Hannah was drawn to it. She described feeling an almost magnetic pull toward the mirror, like it was calling to her specifically. The mirror itself was undeniably beautiful, a 6-foot-tall piece with an elaborate silver frame covered in strange symbols that Margaret said she'd never been able to identify. The glass had an unusual quality, slightly darker than normal mirror glass, with a faint blue tint. Hannah stood in front of it, studying her reflection, and then she did something that would change her life forever. She reached out and touched the glass surface. The security camera footage from that day has been analyzed by experts around the world, and absolutely no one can explain what it shows. The moment Hannah's fingertip makes contact with the mirror, there's a flash of bright blue light that overwhelms the camera for approximately 2 seconds. When the light clears, Hannah is gone, completely vanished, and the mirror has shattered, exploding into thousands of pieces that scatter across the floor in a perfect circle, as if pushed outward by some kind of force from the center where Hannah had been standing. Margaret Chin, who was at the front counter, heard what she described as a sound like thunder mixed with breaking glass and rushed to the back of the store. She found the mirror destroyed and Hannah nowhere to be seen. For 15 minutes, Hannah Peterson didn't exist anywhere on Earth. Margaret called 911 immediately, and police arrived within 6 minutes. They searched the entire store, which wasn't large, maybe 1,500 square feet. There was absolutely nowhere Hannah could have gone. The back door was locked from the inside, the windows were all intact, and the only exit was the front door that Margaret had been watching the entire time. Officers were still searching when, at exactly 3:47 p.m., 15 minutes after she'd vanished, Hannah reappeared. Witnesses described it as her materializing out of thin air, suddenly standing in the exact spot where she'd disappeared, surrounded by the broken glass. But Hannah wasn't the same girl who had touched that mirror. She was screaming at a pitch that made everyone in the store cover their ears. Her eyes were wide open, but didn't seem to be seeing anything in front of her. And most disturbingly, she was clawing at her own face and arms with her fingernails, tearing at her skin like she was trying to rip something off of herself. Blood was streaming down her face from where her nails had torn her cheeks. It took 3 police officers to restrain her and get her into an ambulance. Paramedics had to sedate her because she was thrashing so violently she was injuring herself further. At Oregon Health and Science University Hospital, doctors initially thought Hannah was having a psychotic episode or had taken some kind of hallucinogenic drug. But then the test results started coming back, and everything they thought they understood about this case fell apart. Hannah's blood work showed something that should have been impossible. Her DNA had changed. Specifically, there were genetic markers present in her cells that didn't match any known human genetic database. Geneticists at OHSU brought in specialists from around the country to verify the results, and all of them confirmed the same thing. Hannah's DNA now contained sequences that looked engineered, deliberately modified, with a precision that our current technology couldn't achieve. It was as if someone had taken Hannah's human DNA and spliced in genetic code that didn't come from Earth. Even more disturbing, these genetic modifications were changing in real time. Daily blood tests over the following weeks showed the foreign genetic markers spreading through her system, rewriting more and more of her original DNA. Now, here's where this gets absolutely terrifying. When Hannah finally regained the ability to speak coherently 3 weeks after the incident, she told psychiatrists and researchers what had happened to her during those 15 minutes. She said, touching the mirror felt like being pulled through ice-cold water, and suddenly, she wasn't in the antique store anymore. She was in a blindingly white room with no visible walls, floor, or ceiling, just infinite white space, and there were beings there, surrounding her. Hannah struggled to describe them because, she said, they didn't have consistent forms. They would shift and change, sometimes looking almost human, other times appearing as geometric shapes made of light. These beings, she said, were fascinated by her. Hannah claimed they immediately began what she called the alteration. She said they held her in place with forces she couldn't see, and then they started changing her at the genetic level. She could feel it happening, she said, like her cells were being rewritten from the inside out. The experience was agonizing, like every nerve in her body was on fire. She described seeing her own DNA projected in front of her somehow, watching as these beings manipulated it, adding sequences, removing sections, transforming her into something new. Hannah said she was in that white space for what felt like days, undergoing constant genetic modifications. But when they were done, when they pushed her back through the mirror, only 15 minutes had passed in our world. But here's what makes Hannah's case different from all the others, and what makes it so deeply unsettling. She said the beings told her something before sending her back. They said they were from the year 3505, and that humanity in their time had transcended physical form. They existed as consciousnesses that could manipulate matter and energy at will, and they'd been watching us, observing our timeline, looking for individuals whose genetic Code was compatible with what they called the ascension process. Hannah, for reasons she didn't understand, was compatible, so they altered her DNA, preparing her for something she says is coming. And then they told her the most terrifying part. They're always watching her now. Through every reflective surface, every mirror, every window, every screen. Anywhere she can see a reflection, they can see her. The official medical explanation? Hannah experienced a severe seizure disorder that activated suddenly, possibly triggered by stress or an undiagnosed brain abnormality. They claim her genetic anomalies are the result of a rare mutation, and her disappearance was a dissociative episode where she hid somewhere in the store that wasn't properly searched. As for the security footage showing her vanishing, they suggest it was corrupted or edited, despite multiple independent analyses confirming its authenticity. Pretty weak explanations when you look at all the evidence, right? But here's what they absolutely cannot explain. Hannah's genetic code continues to change. 8 years later, in 2023, doctors confirmed that approximately 23% of her DNA no longer matches standard human genetics. She's literally becoming something else, slowly transforming into whatever those beings in the white space intended her to become. So, what really happened to Hannah Peterson when she touched that mirror? Did she actually step through a portal into the year 3505, where advanced beings performed genetic experiments on her, preparing her for some kind of transformation? And if so, what is she becoming? Hannah herself says she can feel the changes accelerating. She reports abilities she didn't have before. She can see slightly into the ultraviolet spectrum. She can hear frequencies outside normal human range. And most disturbing, she says she can sometimes feel the presence of those beings watching her through reflections. Think about this for a moment. What if mirrors aren't just reflective glass? What if they're windows that work both ways, portals through which entities from the future can observe us, study us, and select individuals for genetic modification? And here's the question that should absolutely terrify you. Hannah wasn't special before touching that mirror. She was just an ordinary teenager. So, what if any one of us could be compatible with whatever process those beings are conducting? What if the next time you look in a mirror, you're not just seeing your own reflection, but are being evaluated by consciousnesses from 3505, beings who might reach through that mirror and pull you into their white space to alter you forever? Hannah says she can't look at mirrors anymore without seeing something moving in the background of her reflection, something that shouldn't be there. She's covered every reflective surface in her home. She avoids windows at night because she knows they're watching and she knows they're not done with her yet. The genetic changes are accelerating and she has no idea what she'll become when the transformation is complete. Will she still be human, or will she be something else entirely, something that belongs more to 3505 than to our time? Extremely creepy when you realize that mirror might have just been one of many portals scattered throughout our world. And touching the wrong reflective surface could transform you into something you don't recognize. Makes you think twice about looking in mirrors, doesn't it? This case is so well documented and disturbing that it caused international panic when it first emerged in 2019. Robert Callahan, a 42-year-old accountant from London, boarded a train home from work on the evening of March 22nd. He fell asleep in his seat and woke up to absolute chaos. The train was stopped, emergency responders were everywhere, and everyone was staring at him like he was a ghost. Robert had been asleep for 22 minutes, according to other passengers, but Robert's experience was completely different. He claimed he woke up on the same train, but in the year 3505. He said he spent 6 months living in that future, trying to understand what had happened to him before he fell asleep on a train there and woke up back in 2019. But when doctors examined Robert, they discovered something that made this case explode. His body had aged 6 months. His cells showed 6 months of deterioration. His hair and nails had grown accordingly. He had even lost weight as if he'd been surviving on limited food. Most disturbing of all, Robert had detailed journals written in his own handwriting describing every single day of those 6 months in 3505. The paper the journals were written on, it hadn't been invented yet. Now, imagine your daily commute home becoming the most documented case of time travel in modern history. Robert Callahan was the definition of ordinary. He worked as a senior accountant at a mid-sized financial firm in London, had been married for 14 years, had 2 children, and took the same train home from work every single day. On March 22, 2019, Robert left his office at 5:45 p.m. and boarded the 6-bound 12 p.m. Southeastern service from London Bridge to Orpington, his usual train. He sat in his usual seat in car 3, sent a text to his wife Sarah saying he'd be home in 40 minutes, and then did what he'd done hundreds of times before. He put in his earbuds, leaned his head against the window, and fell asleep. According to witness testimonies from other passengers in the car, Robert appeared to be sleeping normally for about 15 minutes. The train departed on schedule and was making its regular stops. But then, around 6:30 p.m., passengers noticed something strange. Robert's body started twitching, his eyes moving rapidly under his eyelids like he was in extremely intense REM sleep. One passenger, Claire Morrison, a nurse who was sitting across from Robert, became concerned enough that she moved to check on him. But when she got close to Robert, she said she felt an overwhelming sense of wrongness, like the air around him was different somehow, heavier and charged with static electricity. At 6:34 p.m., exactly 22 minutes after he'd fallen asleep, Robert suddenly jerked awake with a scream that made everyone in the car jump. But the way he woke up was wrong. Claire Morrison later told investigators that Robert looked around with absolute terror and confusion, like he didn't recognize where he was. He started hyperventilating and saying, "This isn't right. I was on the train. I was in 3505. How am I back here?" Passengers thought he was having some kind of medical emergency. The train conductor was called, and the train made an unscheduled stop at Elmstead Wood Station. That's when people really started to notice that something was catastrophically wrong with Robert. His appearance had changed. His hair, which had been professionally cut that morning, was now noticeably longer, at least 2 inches past what it had been. His face looked thinner, more gaunt. His clothes, which had fit him properly when he boarded, now hung loose on his frame as if he'd lost significant weight. And when Claire Morrison checked his pulse, his wrist felt different, the skin looser, showing signs of aging that shouldn't have been possible in 22 minutes. Paramedics arrived and transported Robert to Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Woolwich. And that's when this case went from strange to absolutely world-changing. Medical examinations revealed something that defied every law of biology. Robert's body had aged approximately 6 months. His telomeres, the protective caps on chromosomes that shorten as we age, showed 6 months of normal aging. His hair had grown at a normal rate for 6 months. His fingernails and toenails had grown accordingly. He'd lost 11 kilograms, and his muscle mass had deteriorated in a pattern consistent with 6 months of inadequate nutrition. His beard growth showed 6 months of development. Even his dental examination showed 6 months of normal wear. But he'd only been asleep for 22 minutes on a train. Now, here's where it gets absolutely insane. When doctors searched Robert's pockets, they found something that shouldn't exist. 3 small notebooks filled with Robert's handwriting, documenting day by day what he'd experienced. The journals started with an entry dated March 22, 2019, the day he boarded the train. But the handwriting was shaky and panicked. "I fell asleep on the train home," it read. "When I woke up, everything was wrong. The train is the same, but different. The windows show a city I don't recognize. The other passengers are gone. I'm alone. And when I looked at the train's digital display, it said, year 3505, date March 22nd, 3505. I don't understand what's happening to me." The journals continued for 187 days, entries written almost daily, describing Robert's experience living in the year 3505. He wrote about waking up on that train in a future London that had been transformed beyond recognition. He described stepping off the train at what should have been Orpington Station, but was now something entirely different, a massive transport hub that handled thousands of travelers using vehicles he couldn't even name. Robert wrote about spending months trying to understand where he was, how he'd gotten there, and most importantly, how to get back home. He described meeting other people, though he said they looked at him strangely because of his primitive appearance and clothing. He found work doing manual labor because his 2019 skills were worthless in 3505. He lived in what he described as communal pods, where dozens of people shared living spaces. But here's what made this evidence so powerful. The paper the journals were written on wasn't paper as we know it. Materials scientists at Imperial College London analyzed the notebooks and found that the material was a synthetic polymer cellulose hybrid that doesn't exist in our current technology. It had properties of both paper and advanced plastics, biodegradable but incredibly durable, with a molecular structure that researchers said looked like it came from manufacturing processes we haven't invented yet. The ink Robert used was similarly advanced, a self-leveling liquid that bonded at the molecular level with the paper fibers. Think about that for a moment. Robert somehow had in his possession materials from a future that hasn't happened yet. The journals detailed everything: the food he ate in 3505, which he said tasted synthetic but provided nutrition, the work he did in maintenance crews, the transportation systems he learned to navigate, the people he met who treated him kindly but always seemed puzzled by him. Robert wrote about the constant ache of missing his wife and children, not knowing if he'd ever see them again. And then, on day 187, his final journal entry: "I've been riding the same train route every day, hoping to find whatever doorway brought me here. Today, I felt it, that same heavy feeling in the air. I'm going to fall asleep on this train and pray I wake up in 2019. If you're reading this and I'm home, then it worked. If you're reading this and I'm not there, tell Sarah I never stopped trying to get back to her." And that's exactly what happened. Robert fell asleep on a train in 3505, and 22 minutes later in our timeline, he woke up back on his original train in 2019, having lived 6 months that took only 22 minutes to pass for everyone else. Absolutely mind-blowing. The official explanation from medical authorities and government agencies: Robert experienced an extremely rare form of parasomnia combined with rapid aging disorder, possibly triggered by a brain tumor or a neurological condition. They claimed the journals were fabricated beforehand as part of an elaborate hoax, and the advanced materials were either misidentified or came from classified research that Robert somehow accessed. They even suggested Robert had been planning this hoax for months, had hidden weight loss, and had grown his hair longer, but kept it pinned up to fake the aging. Pretty ridiculous explanations when you look at the evidence, right? But here's what they could never ever explain. The journal entries contained accurate descriptions of his family's activities during those 22 minutes while he was asleep. On day 47 of his journals, Robert wrote, "I wonder what Sarah is doing right now. She's probably making dinner. Tom has soccer practice tonight. I hope he scored a goal." Later verification confirmed that on the day Robert wrote that entry, his son Tom did have soccer practice and did score a goal. How could Robert know that if he was in 3505? So, what really happened to Robert Callahan on that train? Did he actually fall asleep and shift into the year 3505, living 6 full months in a future London while only 22 minutes passed in our time? And if so, what does that mean about the nature of consciousness during sleep? Think about this. Every night when you fall asleep, your consciousness goes somewhere. We call it dreams, but what if dreams are actually our minds slipping through time, experiencing other realities? What if Robert's experience is happening to all of us every single night, but we just don't remember because we don't have those 6 months of physical aging to prove it? What if sleep isn't rest but travel, and we're all moving through different times and realities every time we close our eyes? And here's the most terrifying question of all. Robert brought back physical evidence from 3505, journals written on paper that doesn't exist yet. So, if he could bring objects back from the future, what else might be slipping through? Could there be objects and materials from the year 3505 scattered throughout our world, right now, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered? Could people from our time be falling asleep and waking up in the future at this very moment, living months or years there before finding their way back? And most unsettling of all, Robert said that in 3505, there were others like him, people who'd accidentally slipped through time from various eras. He said he met a woman from 2156 and a man from 2891, both trapped in 3505, both desperately trying to find a way back to their own times. So, if they never made it back, are they still there right now, living in that future, growing old and dying 1,500 years from now because they fell asleep at the wrong moment in the wrong place? Makes you wonder if you should ever really let yourself fall asleep on a train again, doesn't it? Because Robert Callahan did, and he lost 6 months of his life in 22 minutes. And according to his journals, he was one of the lucky ones who actually made it home. This is the case that changes everything, and it happened just last year in 2023. Dr. Elizabeth Marsh, a quantum physicist working at a private research facility in Switzerland, was conducting experiments on what she called temporal echoes. On October 11, 2023, her experiment went catastrophically wrong. According to the surviving footage and witness accounts, Dr. Marsh activated her machine, and a visible tear appeared in the air in front of her. She stepped toward it to shut down the experiment, but the tear pulled her inside. She was gone for exactly 3 hours. During those 3 hours, the research facility's sensors detected massive temporal anomalies. Electronics failed, time seemed to move at different speeds in different rooms, and several staff members reported seeing multiple versions of Dr. Marsh walking through the facility at once. When Dr. Marsh finally emerged from the tear, she wasn't alone. She was carrying data storage devices that contained information from the year 3505. She was physically different, her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and she spoke with absolute certainty about what humanity would become. But here's the truly terrifying part that makes this case different from all the others. Dr. Marsh said the gateway is still open. She said anyone can slip through now if they're in the right place at the right time. And she said that people from 3505 are starting to slip back into our time, and we won't be able to tell them apart from us. Now imagine being one of the most brilliant minds in quantum physics and accidentally tearing open a permanent doorway between our time and the year 3505. Dr. Elizabeth Marsh was a 38-year-old theoretical physicist with 2 PhDs, one from MIT and one from CERN, who'd spent the last decade researching what she called temporal mechanics. She worked at the Kronos Institute, a privately funded research facility located in the Swiss Alps near Grindelwald. The facility was built specifically for high-risk quantum experiments that needed to be conducted far from populated areas. Dr. Marsh's project, which she'd been developing for 5 years, was based on a radical theory that every moment in time leaves an echo, a kind of residual energy signature that persists across the timeline. She believed that by detecting and amplifying these temporal echoes, she could create a window into other times. She never intended to create a doorway. She just wanted to observe. On October 11, 2023, at 2:47 p.m. local time, Dr. Marsh activated her experimental device in Laboratory 7, a reinforced chamber built to contain any unexpected energy releases. Her team of 6 researchers was monitoring from the observation room next door. The machine itself was relatively small, about the size of a refrigerator, but it consumed enormous amounts of energy to generate what Dr. Marsh called a temporal resonance field. For the first 30 seconds, everything seemed to be working as expected. Sensors detected unusual energy patterns, and monitors showed fluctuations in space-time that confirmed Dr. Marsh's theories were correct. But then something went catastrophically wrong. According to Dr. Marcus Chen, the lead engineer in the observation room, the air in front of Dr. Marsh's machine began to distort. He described it as reality itself tearing open, a vertical line appearing in the air that expanded into a jagged opening about 8 feet tall and 4 feet wide. Through the tear, security footage shows what appears to be a different location, though the image is distorted and unclear. Dr. Marsh, realizing something had gone terribly wrong, reached for the emergency shutdown. But the moment she got close to the tear, witnesses say it seemed to grab her, pulling her toward it like a powerful magnetic force. Dr. Marsh fought against it. Her team could see her trying to resist, but within seconds she was pulled completely through the tear and vanished. The tear remained open, pulsing with blue-white light, and what happened next sent the entire facility into chaos. For 3 hours, the Kronos Institute experienced temporal anomalies that defied everything science understands about time. Clocks in different rooms showed wildly different times, some running forward at normal speed, others running backwards, and some completely stopped. Electronics began failing throughout the facility, not all at once but in waves, as if surges of temporal energy were washing through the building. Staff members reported experiencing bizarre sensations. Deja vu so intense they felt like they were living the same moments over and over, and several people claimed they saw Dr. Marsh walking through hallways, even though she'd vanished into the tier. Dr. Chen reported seeing 3 different versions of Dr. Marsh simultaneously. One walking toward the cafeteria, one in her office writing equations on a whiteboard, and one standing in Laboratory 7 staring at the tier. Think about how terrifying that must have been. seeing multiple copies of the same person existing in different locations at once. At exactly 5:47 p.m., 3 hours after she'd disappeared, Dr. Marsh emerged from the tear, but the woman who stepped out wasn't the same person who'd been pulled in. Dr. Marsh was carrying two crystalline devices that seemed to pulse with internal light, objects that no one on her team recognized. Her appearance had changed in subtle but deeply unsettling ways. Her eyes, which had been dark brown, now had a faint luminescence to them that became clearly visible in dim lighting. Staff members reported that when Dr. Marsh looked at them, her eyes seemed to glow with a soft blue light. Her skin had a slightly different texture, smoother and more uniform, as if it had been somehow perfected. And the way she moved was different, more precise and deliberate, as if she'd gained a kind of awareness of her own body that humans don't normally possess. But what made everyone in that facility realize something world-changing had occurred was what Dr. Marsh said when she emerged. Her first words were, "I've seen it. I've seen all of it. I've been to 3505, and I brought back proof." The crystalline devices she carried, which she called data crystals, contained petabytes of information encoded in a format that our current technology couldn't read without specialized equipment. Over the following weeks, as researchers developed ways to interface with these devices, they discovered that the crystals contained detailed records from the year 3505. Historical databases, scientific archives, maps of future Earth, and most disturbing of all, records of people who'd traveled through time, including detailed files on every person who appears in the cases you've heard in this video. The data was authenticated by multiple independent research teams, and absolutely no one could explain how Dr. Marsh could have fabricated information this complex and this internally consistent. Now here's where this case becomes absolutely terrifying, and why it's different from every other case we've covered. Dr. Marsh underwent extensive medical and psychological evaluation, and during these examinations, she made claims that have sent shockwaves through the scientific community. She said that her 3 hours in the year 3505 felt like 3 weeks to her. She described a world that had evolved beyond anything we can imagine, cities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, humans who'd merged with technology so completely that the distinction no longer existed, and most importantly, a complete understanding of time as a dimension that could be navigated just like space. But the truly horrifying revelation came when Dr. Marsh explained what had happened to the tier, the gateway her machine had accidentally created. She said the gateway didn't close when she came back through. It's still there, invisible to our eyes now, but still open, still functioning. Dr. Marsh said that her machine had created what she called a permanent temporal bridge between October 11th, 2023 and the year 3505. The bridge exists in a state outside normal space, accessible from specific coordinates across both time periods. And here's the part that should keep you awake at night. Dr. Marsh said, the beings in 3505 know about the bridge now. They know it's open, and they're using it. She claimed that since she returned, people from the year 3505 have been slipping through the bridge and appearing in our time, integrating themselves into 2023 and 2024 society. They look human, they act human, but they're not from our time. They're visitors from 1,500 years in the future, living among us, and we have no way to identify them. Think about the implications of that for a moment. The person sitting next to you on the bus, your coworker, the barista at your coffee shop, any of them could be from the year 3505, using this bridge to visit or study our time period. Dr. Marsh said the people from 3505 have reasons for coming here that she wasn't allowed to know, but she suspects it has something to do with changing certain events in our timeline to affect their future. She said she saw evidence that they've been manipulating historical events for decades, possibly centuries, by sending people back through various temporal rifts and gateways like the one her machine created, the official response from Swiss authorities and international scientific organizations. They've classified most of Dr. Marsh's research and shut down the Kronos Institute permanently. They claim the incident was a contained accident involving experimental quantum equipment, that Dr. Marsh suffered neurological damage from exposure to high-energy particles, and that her claims about traveling to 3505 are delusions caused by brain injury. They say the data crystals are elaborate fakes, possibly created by a rival research group trying to discredit her work, They even suggested that Dr. Marsh might have deliberately staged this entire event for publicity. Pretty absurd when you consider that her research facility was destroyed, her career was ruined, and she's now under constant surveillance. What possible benefit would that give her? But here's what they absolutely cannot explain. The temporal anomalies during those 3 hours were recorded by independent sensors all across Switzerland. Atomic clocks at facilities hundreds of kilometers away registered synchronization errors during the exact time window when Dr. Marsh's gateway was open. Satellite data showed gravitational anomalies centered on the Kronos Institute location. And most damning of all, the information contained in those data crystals has been partially verified. Technical specifications for technologies that don't exist yet have proven to be theoretically sound when analyzed by experts. How could Dr. Marsh have faked that? So, what really happened at the Kronos Institute on October 11th, 2023? Did Dr. Elizabeth Marsh actually tear open a permanent gateway to the year 3505? Is that bridge still open right now, allowing people from the future to walk into our time whenever they choose? And if so, how many of them are here? How many people walking around in 2024 are actually visitors from 3505, living among us with knowledge of what's to come, possibly influencing events to shape their own timeline? Think about every person you've met recently who seemed slightly off, who knew things they shouldn't know, who moved or spoke in ways that felt subtly wrong. Could they be from the future? Could they have stepped through Dr. Marsh's gateway? And here's the final, most terrifying question that ties all of these cases together. Every case we've covered in this video, from Viktor Markov in the Moscow tunnel to Robert Callahan on the train, every single person who accidentally slipped into the year 3505 and came back changed. What if they all went to the same place? What if the year 3505 is some kind of convergence point, a moment in time where all these temporal rifts and gateways lead? What if there's something about that specific year that makes it accessible from multiple points in our timeline? Dr. Marsh said she saw evidence of this in the archives she accessed. She said 3505 is what they call a temporal nexus, a year where the fabric of time is naturally thinner, making it easier for people to slip through from other eras. And if that's true, then every person who's ever mysteriously disappeared, everyone who's vanished without explanation, could potentially be in the year 3505 right now, trapped in a future they were never meant to see. So the next time someone near you seems to know something they shouldn't, or moves in a way that seems too precise, or looks at modern technology with an expression that's not quite wonder but more like nostalgia, ask yourself, are they really from our time? Or did they step through Dr. Marsh's gateway from the year 3505? Because according to her, they're here, they're among us, and they're watching everything we do, possibly shaping our present to create their perfect future. Makes you look at everyone around you a little differently, doesn't it? Absolutely terrifying when you realize that the gateway is open right now, and there's nothing anyone can do to close it.